The morning mist clung to the grounds of Windsor Castle like secrets refusing to be told. Prince William stood at the tall windows of his private study, watching the gardens emerge from the grey dawn. His hands gripped the windowsill until his knuckles turned white. The phone call from Chief Inspector Matthews still echoed in his mind from 3 hours ago. "Your Royal Highness, we need to speak urgently about the Queen Consort's vehicle." William had known this day would come eventually. The weight of the crown had always carried the burden of family secrets, but this felt different. This felt like the foundation of everything he had believed about his stepmother was about to crack. Catherine entered the room quietly, carrying 2 cups of tea. She set one down on his desk and approached him carefully. After 15 years of marriage, she could read the tension in his shoulders like a familiar book. "The children are asking why you left so early this morning," she said softly. "George wanted to show you his history project about the Tudor monarchs." William turned from the window. His blue eyes, so much like his mother's, held a storm Catherine had rarely seen. "Tell them I'll look at it tonight. I promise." "Will?" She reached for his hand. "What's happening? You've been different since that phone call. The one you took in the other room." He squeezed her fingers, drawing strength from her steady presence. Catherine had always been his anchor, the one person who could pull him back from the edge when royal duties threatened to drown him. But this was something he wasn't sure she should carry with him. "There's been a development in the investigation," he said carefully. "Something they found in Camilla's car." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. She knew about the ongoing security review that had been quietly conducted on all senior royals following some concerning intelligence reports. What she didn't know was how deep the investigation had gone. "What kind of development?" Before William could answer, his private secretary knocked and entered. James Whitmore had served the royal household for 20 years, and his usually composed face showed cracks of concern. "Sir, Chief Inspector Matthews is here. He's waiting in the blue drawing room as requested. He says the matter cannot wait any longer." William nodded grimly. "Catherine, I need you to keep the children occupied this morning. Perhaps take them to see the horses." "William." Her voice carried the authority of a future queen. "Whatever this is about, we face it together. That's what we promised each other." He looked at his wife, this remarkable woman who had chosen to share the impossible burden of royal life. She deserved the truth, but the truth might shatter more than just their morning routine. "It's about Camilla," he said quietly. "About things that happened before she married my father. Things that might change everything we thought we knew about her." Catherine set down her teacup with steady hands. "Then, we'd better go hear what the inspector has to say." They walked together through the corridors of Windsor Castle, their footsteps echoing off walls that had witnessed centuries of royal drama. William wondered if any of his ancestors had faced a morning quite like this one. The weight of history pressed down on him as they approached the blue drawing room. Chief Inspector Matthews stood when they entered. He was a tall, lean man with graying hair and the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. Behind him stood Detective Sergeant Sarah Collins, a younger woman with a tablet in her hands and a serious expression. "Your Royal Highnesses," Matthews began with a slight bow. "Thank you for seeing us on such short notice. I'm afraid what we've discovered requires your immediate attention." William gestured for everyone to sit, but he remained standing by the fireplace. The morning fire crackled quietly, the only sound in the suddenly tense room. "Inspector," William said, his voice carrying the authority he had learned from years of public service. "I understand this concerns the Queen Consort's vehicle. I need you to be direct about what you've found." Matthews exchanged a glance with his sergeant before opening a manila folder. "Sir, during our routine security sweep last week, we discovered a hidden compartment in the Queen Consort's personal Bentley. The compartment contained documents and photographs that raised serious questions about activities from before her marriage to His late Majesty." The words hung in the air like smoke. Catherine reached for William's hand, offering silent support. "What kind of documents?" William asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Detective Sergeant Collins looked up from her tablet. "Financial records, sir.
Bank statements from accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands.
Accounts that were active during the period when the Queen Consort was still married to Andrew Parker Bowles.
William felt something cold settle in his stomach. Are you suggesting that Camilla was hiding money?
More than that, sir, Matthews continued. The documents suggest she was receiving regular payments from sources we haven't been able to identify yet.
Large payments. And there's correspondence that suggests these payments were connected to information about the royal family.
The room fell silent except for the crackling fire.
William stared at the inspector, trying to process what he was hearing.
Camilla, the woman who had become like a second mother to him after his own mother's death, the woman his father had loved so deeply it had nearly cost him his crown, could she have been selling royal secrets?
There's more, Collins said quietly, consulting her tablet.
The photographs show meetings between the Queen Consort and individuals we've identified as journalists and media executives.
Meetings that took place during some very sensitive periods in royal history.
William's mind raced back through the years.
All those times when private family moments had somehow found their way into the press.
The arguments between his parents that had been reported with impossible accuracy. The details about his own relationship with Catherine that had appeared in newspapers before they had told anyone.
How long has this been going on? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper.
Based on the documents, sir, it appears to have started in the early 1990s and continued until at least 2010, Matthews replied.
Possibly longer, but we haven't found evidence beyond that date yet. Catherine spoke for the first time since they'd sat down. Are you absolutely certain these documents are authentic?
We've had our forensics team examine everything, Collins answered.
Paper, ink, handwriting analysis. Everything appears genuine. But there's something else, ma'am.
She touched her tablet screen and looked up at William.
There are recordings, sir. Audio recordings of phone conversations.
The Queen Consort speaking with unknown individuals about family matters, about private conversations she'd had with various royal family members.
William closed his eyes. The betrayal felt like a physical pain in his chest. Have you listened to these recordings? Some of them, yes, sir.
They contain details about private family discussions, advanced knowledge of royal announcements, and personal information that would have been very valuable to certain media outlets.
The fire popped in the grate, making everyone jump slightly. William opened his eyes and looked at his wife. Catherine's face was pale but determined. She squeezed his hand tighter. Inspector, William said, straightening his shoulders. I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. Do you believe the Queen Consort was selling information about the royal family to the press?
Matthews met his gaze directly.
Based on the evidence we've found so far, sir, that appears to be exactly what was happening.
The payments correspond with major royal news stories.
The timing is too precise to be coincidental.
William felt the world shift slightly around him.
Everything he thought he knew about his family, about the woman who had comforted him after his mother's death, about the stability he thought they had built, all of it was suddenly in question. There's one more thing, Collins said hesitantly. Some of the recordings mention you specifically, sir.
Conversations about your relationship with the Duchess of Cambridge, about your children, about private family gatherings.
Catherine's grip on his hand tightened further.
William looked at her and saw his own shock reflected in her eyes. Their private life, their children's privacy, had potentially been sold for money.
What do you need from me? William asked, his voice steady despite the chaos in his mind.
We need to confront the Queen Consort with this evidence, Matthews said.
But, given her position and the sensitive nature of these allegations, we felt it was important to inform you first. This could have significant implications for the monarchy. William nodded slowly. When do you want to speak with her? Today, if possible, sir.
Every day we delay increases the risk that evidence might be destroyed or that word of our investigation might reach the wrong people.
She's at Clarence House this morning, William said.
She has a private engagement this afternoon, but she should be available until noon.
Matthews stood up. Sir, I have to ask, would you prefer to be present when we question her? Given the nature of the allegations and your position as heir to the throne, it might be appropriate. William looked at Catherine again. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between them without words. Yes, William said. I'll be there. But I want to speak with her first, alone. Before you present your evidence. Sir, I'm not sure that's advisable, Matthews began. Inspector, William's voice carried the weight of centuries of royal authority. This woman has been part of my family for over 20 years. If she's betrayed us all, if she's sold our privacy and our trust for money, then I need to look her in the eye and ask her why. I need to give her the chance to explain before you arrest her. Matthews nodded reluctantly. Very well, sir. But we'll need to be present in the building. If she attempts to destroy evidence or flee. She won't flee, William said with quiet certainty. Whatever else Camilla might be, she's not a coward. If she's guilty of this, she'll face it. As the inspectors gathered their materials and prepared to leave, Catherine stood and walked to the window. The morning mist had lifted, revealing the ancient gardens in sharp detail. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago, but somehow everything felt different. Will, she said softly, not turning around. What if it's true? What if she really did betray the family? William joined her at the window, looking out at the grounds where he had played as a child, where his own children now played. Then, we deal with it, he said quietly. The same way the monarchy has dealt with every crisis for 1,000 years. We protect the institution, we protect our children, and we do what's right. And if what's right means destroying the woman your father loved. William was quiet for a long moment. My father is gone. His happiness matters less now than the future of the crown. If Camilla has betrayed us, if she's put the monarchy at risk for money, then she's made her choice. Catherine turned to face him. You sound so certain, but I can see the doubt in your eyes. Part of you doesn't want to believe this. Part of me doesn't, he admitted. Camilla has been kind to me, to our children. She made my father happy in his final years. But kindness doesn't excuse treason, Catherine. And if she sold information about our children to the press. He didn't finish the sentence, but Catherine understood. Their children's safety and privacy were sacred to both of them. If Camilla had violated that trust, there would be no forgiveness. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. James Whitmore entered again, his face grave. Sir, I've just received a call from Clarence House. The Queen Consort's private secretary says she's been trying to reach you all morning. She seems quite agitated about something. William and Catherine exchanged glances. Did she say what about? No, sir. But she's insisting on seeing you immediately. She says it's a matter of utmost urgency regarding the family's safety. William felt a chill run down his spine. Did Camilla know about the investigation? Was she trying to get ahead of the story somehow? Tell her I'll be there within the hour, William said. And, James? Call ahead to security at Clarence House. I want extra protection today. Yes, sir. As Whitmore left, Catherine moved closer to her husband. She knows, Catherine said quietly. Somehow, she knows they found the evidence. Maybe, William replied. Or maybe she's going to confess before we confront her. Maybe there's some explanation we haven't considered. Do you really believe that? William looked at his wife, this woman who had stood beside him through every challenge of royal life. No, he said honestly. I think Camilla Parker Bowles has been playing a very long game, and today it finally ends. He walked to his desk and picked up his phone, scrolling to a number he rarely called anymore. His younger brother Harry answered on the second ring. William? It's early, even for you. Harry, I need you to know something before you hear it from anyone else. There's been a development with Camilla. A serious one. There was silence on the other end of the line, then Harry's voice, sharper now. What kind of development? The kind that changes everything we thought we knew about her. I can't say more over the phone, but you should prepare yourself. This is going to be very public very soon. William, what the hell is going on? She may have been selling information about our family to the press. For years, Harry. Possibly since before she married Dad. Another long silence. When Harry spoke again, his voice was cold. Are you certain? The police have evidence. Documents, recordings, financial records. They're going to confront her today. And you're warning me because? Because you're my brother, and because this is going to hurt. Regardless of our differences, Harry, this affects all of us. Your children, my children, the whole family. Harry was quiet for a moment. What do you need me to do? Nothing right now. Just be prepared. And, Harry? Be careful who you talk to about this. If Camilla has been selling information, we don't know who else might be involved. Understood. William ended the call and turned back to Catherine. She was still standing by the window, but now she was watching him with the kind of intense focus she usually reserved for state occasions. Ready? He asked. No, she said honestly. But that's never stopped us before. They left Windsor Castle together, riding in silence toward Clarence House and what William knew would be one of the most difficult conversations of his life. As their car passed through the gates and onto the public roads, William caught sight of photographers with long lenses positioned across the street. They already know something's happening, Catherine observed. They always do, William replied grimly. The question is whether one of them has been getting their information directly from Camilla. The car pulled up to Clarence House 20 minutes later. The building looked peaceful in the morning light, its classical facade giving no hint of the storm that was about to break inside its walls. William had visited here countless times over the years, for family dinners and holiday celebrations. Now it felt like enemy territory. As they walked up the steps, Catherine took his arm. Whatever we find in there, whatever she says, remember that you're not just her stepson today. You're the future king. That has to come first. William nodded, straightening his shoulders. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier than it did in that moment, walking toward a confrontation that might destroy what was left of his father's legacy and shatter the fragile peace the royal family had built in recent years. The door opened before they could knock. Camilla's private secretary, a nervous-looking woman named Helen, greeted them with obvious relief. Your Royal Highnesses, thank goodness you're here. Her Majesty has been quite distressed all morning. She's in the morning room, and she's been asking for you constantly, sir. William nodded curtly. We'll see her now. As they walked through the familiar halls toward the morning room, William tried to prepare himself for what was coming. In a few minutes, he would look the woman who had raised him like a son in the eye and ask her if she had betrayed his family for money. He would have to decide whether to believe whatever explanation she offered, and he would have to live with the consequences of that decision for the rest of his life. The morning room door was closed. William paused with his hand on the handle, taking one last moment before everything changed forever. The morning room at Clarence House had always been Camilla's sanctuary. Decorated in soft yellows and blues, filled with photographs of family gatherings and personal mementos, it reflected the warmth she had tried to bring to royal life. But, as William opened the door, the room felt different. Smaller somehow, as if the walls were closing in on secrets that could no longer be contained. Camilla stood by the tall windows overlooking the garden, her back to the door. She was still in her morning clothes, a simple cashmere sweater and wool skirt, but there was a tension in her posture that William had never seen before. Her silver hair, usually perfectly styled, looked as though she had been running her fingers through it. William, she said without turning around. Thank you for coming so quickly. Camilla. His voice was carefully neutral. You said it was urgent. She finally turned to face him, and William was shocked by what he saw. Camilla looked older than her 76 years, her face drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like fear. Her blue eyes, usually bright with humor and warmth, were red-rimmed and hollow. Catherine, dear, Camilla said, noticing the Duchess for the first time. I didn't realize you were coming too. We thought it best, Catherine replied diplomatically, settling into one of the floral armchairs. Given the urgency of your message. Camilla moved away from the window, her movements careful and deliberate. She sat across from Catherine, leaving William standing by the fireplace, a position that suddenly felt very formal and imposing. I suppose you've already heard, Camilla said quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap. About the investigation. William kept his expression neutral, though his pulse quickened. What investigation would that be? Camilla's laugh was sharp and bitter. Please, William. Don't insult my intelligence or your own. I know they've been to see you. I know what they found in my car. The admission hung in the air like smoke. Catherine shifted slightly in her chair, but remained silent. William studied his stepmother's face, looking for signs of deception or defiance. Instead, he saw something that surprised him: relief. So you know why I'm here, William said. I've known this day would come for 20 years, Camilla replied. I just didn't think it would be today. William moved away from the fireplace and took the chair opposite Camilla. The furniture that had seemed so comfortable during family gatherings now felt like props in an interrogation room. 20 years, he repeated. That's a long time to live with secrets. Yes, it is. Camilla's voice was barely above a whisper. Longer than you can possibly imagine. Catherine leaned forward slightly. Camilla, the police have documents. Bank records, photographs, recordings. They believe you were selling information about the family to the press. I know what they believe, Camilla said, finally, meeting William's eyes. The question is what you believe. William studied her face, searching for answers in the woman who had been such a complicated part of his life. I don't know what to believe anymore. Help me understand. Camilla stood up abruptly and walked to a small writing desk in the corner of the room. She opened the top drawer and pulled out a manila envelope, holding it for a moment before returning to her chair. Before I show you this, she said, I need you to understand something. Everything I did, every choice I made, was to protect this family. To protect you. Protect me? William's voice rose slightly. By selling our private conversations to journalists? By controlling the narrative, Camilla said firmly. By making sure the stories that came out were the ones I chose, not the ones that would have destroyed us all. She handed the envelope to William. Open it. William hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside were more photographs, but these were different from what the police had shown him. These showed Camilla meeting with various people, but they also showed other familiar faces, palace staff members, government officials, even some members of parliament. What am I looking at? William asked. The real story, Camilla said. William, do you remember the autumn of 2002? When your father's relationship with me first became public knowledge? William nodded. It had been a difficult time, with press speculation reaching fever pitch and public opinion strongly against his father's relationship with the woman many still blamed for his parents' divorce. Do you remember how carefully managed that whole period was? How the stories that came out, while invasive, somehow always stopped just short of being completely destructive? William looked at the photographs again, beginning to see patterns he hadn't noticed before. You're saying you controlled what information was released. I'm saying I chose the lesser of many evils, Camilla said. William, there were things about your parents' marriage, about your father's private life, about you and Harry, that certain journalists knew or suspected. Stories that would have destroyed the monarchy if they had come out at the wrong time or in the wrong way. Catherine had been silent throughout this exchange, but now she spoke. So you decided to give them smaller stories to prevent bigger ones? Exactly. Camilla's voice was stronger now, as if she was relieved to finally be telling the truth. I fed them carefully chosen details about family dinners, about holiday plans, about minor disagreements. Nothing that would cause real harm, but enough to satisfy their appetite and keep them from digging deeper. William set the photographs aside, his mind racing. The money. The Swiss bank accounts.
Payment for services rendered, Camilla said bitterly.
But, not in the way they think. William, I wasn't being paid by journalists. I was paying them. The room went completely silent.
Even the sounds from the street outside seemed to fade away as William processed what she had just said.
You were bribing journalists? Catherine asked.
I was purchasing their silence, Camilla corrected.
About things that would have brought down the monarchy. About your grandfather's health problems that were kept secret. About your father's depression after Diana's death.
About the real reason Harry had such difficulties in school. William felt the world shift around him again, but this time in a different direction.
What real reason? Camilla hesitated, glancing at Catherine before answering. The bullying was much worse than anyone knew.
There were threats, William.
Death threats against Harry from classmates whose parents fed them hatred about the royal family.
The school covered it up, but the press found out. If that story had broken, it would have made Harry look weak and put him in more danger, William finished quietly.
So I gave them other stories instead.
I told them about his grades, about his rebellious behavior, about normal teenage troubles. I let them paint him as a typical troubled youth instead of a boy who was being terrorized because of who his father was. William closed his eyes, trying to reframe everything he thought he knew about those difficult years after his mother's death.
The recordings the police found.
Our conversations with journalists where I'm giving them harmless family details to distract them from more dangerous stories they were pursuing, Camilla said.
If you listen to them carefully, you'll notice something. I never gave them information that actually hurt anyone.
Birthday party guest lists, menu choices, vacation destinations that were already being planned publicly. Trivial things that made them feel like they had inside access.
Catherine was studying the photographs more carefully now. These people you met with, some of them aren't journalists.
No, Camilla agreed. Some of them are government officials who were helping me coordinate this effort. Others are private investigators I hired to monitor what information was circulating in media circles. I needed to know what threats we were facing before I could neutralize them. William opened his eyes and looked at his stepmother with new understanding.
This whole operation, how long have you been doing this?
Since before I married your father, Camilla said. Charles and I both knew that our relationship would always be controversial. We knew there would be people trying to destroy us, trying to use us to damage the monarchy. So we developed a system to manage the information flow.
Dad knew?
William's voice was barely audible. Camilla's face softened for the first time since they had arrived.
Your father knew everything.
He approved every payment, every meeting, every story I fed to the press. William, he didn't just know, it was his idea. The revelation hit William like a physical blow. His father, the man who had always seemed so uncomfortable with the press, so frustrated by their intrusion into royal privacy, had actually been orchestrating a sophisticated disinformation campaign.
Why didn't he tell me? William asked.
Because he wanted to protect you from having to make these kinds of choices, Camilla said. He hoped that by the time you became king, the media landscape would have changed enough that this wouldn't be necessary. He wanted you to be able to lead with clean hands.
Catherine had been listening to all of this with growing amazement.
The stories about William and me when we were dating.
The ones that seemed to come from inside sources but never revealed anything truly private.
My doing, Camilla confirmed. You two were so happy, so normal together. The press was desperate for scandal, for signs of trouble. So I gave them little stories about dinner plans and movie preferences to keep them from inventing bigger problems. William stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the garden where his father had spent so many peaceful hours. All these years, I thought you were just lucky that the press treated you better than they treated Mum. Your mother had a very different approach to media management, Camilla said carefully.
She preferred complete honesty or complete silence. In many ways, that was admirable.
But it was also dangerous.
The press doesn't respect silence, William.
They interpret it as a challenge.
So you decided to control the game instead of refusing to play it. I decided to protect the people I love by any means necessary. William turned back to face her. What about the other evidence? The financial records show payments going back to the early 1990s, before you and Dad were even together. Camilla's expression grew more serious. Those were different circumstances. During the worst years of your parents' marriage, when the media was circling like vultures, I was approached by certain journalists who had extremely damaging information. Information that would have destroyed not just your parents, but you and Harry as well. What kind of information? Details about your parents' private conversations that should never have been recorded. Evidence of affairs that went both ways. Financial irregularities in some of the charitable organizations. Things that would have made the phone hacking scandal look like a minor privacy breach. Catherine was watching this exchange with growing alarm. You're talking about blackmail. I'm talking about protection, Camilla said firmly. Yes, I paid journalists to suppress certain stories. Yes, I maintained Swiss bank accounts to keep these transactions secret. But everything I did was to preserve the monarchy for future generations. William sat back down, feeling exhausted by the weight of these revelations. The police don't see it that way. The police see bank records and meetings with journalists, Camilla said. They don't understand the context. They don't know what stories would have broken without my intervention. Then, help them understand, William said. Give them the full picture. Camilla shook her head. William, if I tell them everything, if I reveal the full scope of what I've been doing, it won't just implicate me. It will bring down government officials, palace staff members, even some members of parliament who helped coordinate this effort. People who risked their careers to protect the crown. People like whom? Like your private secretary, James Whitmore. Like the former Archbishop of Canterbury who helped us manage the story about your father's divorce. Like 3 different prime ministers who were briefed on our activities and gave their tacit approval. William felt the implications crashing over him like waves. You're talking about a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of government. I'm talking about the reality of protecting a 1,000-year-old institution in the modern media age, Camilla said. This isn't a fairy tale, William. Kingdoms don't survive on good intentions and noble principles alone. Sometimes they survive because people are willing to do unpleasant things in secret. Catherine had been quiet through most of this conversation, but now she spoke up. What do you want from us, Camilla? The police are going to arrest you today unless William intervenes. I want you to understand that everything I did for the crown, Camilla said. For Charles, for William, for your children. If I go to prison for that, so be it. But I need you to know the truth before you make your decision. William looked at his stepmother, this complicated woman who had been both a blessing and a burden to his family for so many years. What decision? Whether to support me when the police arrive, or to let them arrest me without protest. Whether to help me tell the full story, or to let me take the blame alone. The sound of car doors slamming in the courtyard outside made them all look toward the window. Through the glass, William could see Chief Inspector Matthews and Detective Sergeant Collins getting out of an unmarked police car. They're here, Catherine said quietly. Camilla stood up, smoothing her skirt with hands that barely trembled. Whatever you decide, William, I want you to know that I love you like my own son. Everything I did because I believed it was necessary to protect you and your future. William stood as well, facing the most difficult decision of his life. In a few minutes, the police would enter this room and present their evidence against Camilla. They would expect him, as the future king, to support their investigation and allow justice to take its course. But now he knew that justice wasn't as simple as it had seemed this morning. Camilla, he said quietly, if what you're telling me is true, if Dad really approved all of this, then why did you hide the evidence in your car? Why not keep it somewhere safer? Camilla smiled for the first time that morning, and, for a moment she looked like the warm, mischievous woman who had helped raise him. Because, my dear boy, I never intended for this to stay secret forever. I always knew that someday, someone would need to know the full truth about what we did to protect the monarchy. I just hoped it would be under better circumstances.
A knock at the morning room door interrupted any response William might have made. Helen's voice called from the hallway. "Your Majesty, the police are here to see you." Camilla straightened her shoulders and walked toward the door. "Send them in, Helen." As her hand reached for the door handle, she paused and looked back at William and Catherine. "Whatever happens next, remember that the crown is bigger than any one person. Even me. Even you. Make the choice that protects the institution, not the individual." The door opened, and Chief Inspector Matthews entered, followed by Detective Sergeant Collins. The inspector's eyes took in the scene: William standing by the fireplace, Catherine in her chair, Camilla by the door with her hands still on the handle. "Your Royal Highness," Matthews said to William with a slight nod. Then, turning to Camilla, "Your Majesty, we need to speak with you about evidence found in your vehicle." "I've been expecting you, Inspector," Camilla said calmly. "Please, sit down. I believe we have quite a lot to discuss." Chief Inspector Matthews settled into the chair William had vacated, his sharp eyes taking in every detail of the room. Detective Sergeant Collins remained standing, her tablet ready to record whatever was about to unfold. The morning light streaming through the windows seemed to intensify the tension that filled the space between them all. "Your Majesty," Matthews began, his voice professionally courteous but firm. "We found a hidden compartment in your Bentley containing documents that suggest serious breaches of royal protocol and, potentially illegal activities." Camilla remained standing by the door, her posture straight and dignified despite the circumstances. "Inspector, before you continue, I think you should know that I've already explained the situation to Prince William. He's aware of the nature of your discoveries." Matthews glanced at William, who nodded confirmation. "Very well. Then, you'll understand the gravity of what we found. Bank records showing payments totaling over £3 million over nearly 2 decades. Recorded conversations with journalists. Photographs documenting secret meetings. All of this suggests you were selling royal family information to the press." "That's one interpretation," Camilla said calmly. "But not the correct one." Detective Sergeant Collins looked up from her tablet. "Ma'am, we have audio recordings of you providing details about private family gatherings, royal travel plans, and personal conversations with other family members. How else would you characterize that?" William watched this exchange with growing tension. He could see that Camilla was about to reveal everything she had just told him, potentially implicating dozens of other people in what the police would certainly view as a criminal conspiracy. "Inspector," William interjected, "before the Queen Consort answers that question, I need to understand something. What exactly do you believe the scope of this investigation should be?" Matthews turned his attention to William. "Sir, our investigation focuses on potential breaches of the Official Secrets Act, possible treason charges related to the unauthorized disclosure of state information, and financial crimes including tax evasion related to the undisclosed foreign accounts." "And if your investigation uncovers evidence that this alleged activity was authorized or directed by other senior officials? Then, those officials would also face investigation, regardless of their position or rank." William and Camilla exchanged glances. She gave him an almost imperceptible nod, as if to say that she understood the implications of full disclosure as clearly as he did. "Inspector Matthews," Camilla said, returning to her chair, "I'm going to tell you exactly what I did and why I did it. But, first, I need your assurance that you'll listen to the complete story before making any arrests." "Ma'am, I can't make promises about the outcome of this investigation." "I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to listen to all the evidence before drawing conclusions." Collins was typing rapidly on her tablet. "For the record, this conversation is being documented as part of our formal investigation." "I understand," Camilla said. "William, Catherine, you should probably know that everything I'm about to say will likely become part of the public record eventually." Catherine spoke for the first time since the police arrived. "Are you certain you want to do this?" "I'm certain that the truth needs to be told," Camilla replied. "Inspector, the money you found, you assumed I was receiving payments from journalists." "In fact, I was paying them." Matthews frowned. "You were paying journalists? For what purpose?"
To suppress stories that would have damaged the monarchy. To redirect their attention away from truly damaging information toward harmless details that satisfied their need for inside access without actually harming anyone. You're admitting to bribing members of the press? I'm admitting to protecting the crown by any means necessary. Collins was typing furiously now. Ma'am, that's still illegal. Corruption, obstruction of justice, conspiracy. Detective Sergeant, William said quietly, perhaps you should let the Queen Consort finish explaining before you start listing charges. Matthews held up a hand to quiet his subordinate. Continue, Your Majesty. Camilla reached into the envelope she had shown William earlier and pulled out a leather-bound journal. This contains records of every transaction, every meeting, every story I managed over the past 25 years. It also contains the names of everyone who was involved in or aware of these activities. She opened the journal and began reading. September 15, 1998. Meeting with editor Sarah Hamilton of the Sunday Telegraph. Provided information about Prince Charles's preference for organic farming to redirect attention from upcoming story about his private correspondence with government ministers regarding GM crops. Payment, £15,000 to Hamilton's private account. Matthews was scribbling notes rapidly. You're saying you gave this editor a story about organic farming to prevent a more damaging story about political interference? The GM crop story would have suggested that Prince Charles was attempting to influence government policy inappropriately, Camilla explained. It would have violated constitutional protocols about royal political neutrality. So I gave them a human interest story about his gardening instead. William was listening with growing amazement. The precision and scope of what Camilla was describing went far beyond anything he had imagined. October 3, 1999, Camilla continued. Meeting with investigative journalist Michael Crawford. He had obtained evidence of a relationship between a senior palace official and a foreign intelligence operative. Payment, £50,000 for permanent suppression of story. A foreign intelligence operative? Collins asked, looking up from her tablet. Someone who was attempting to gather information about royal security protocols, Camilla said. If that story had broken, it would have compromised national security and forced a complete review of palace security arrangements. Matthews was looking increasingly troubled. Your Majesty, you're describing a systematic campaign of media manipulation that potentially involves national security issues. Who authorized these activities? Camilla closed the journal and looked directly at William. Prince Charles authorized every single operation. Furthermore, they were conducted with the knowledge and tacit approval of 3 different prime ministers, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the Cabinet Secretary, and the Director General of MI5. The room fell into complete silence. Even the sounds from the street outside seemed muted as the full implications of what Camilla had just revealed settled over everyone present. You're telling us that the late king was running an intelligence operation using media manipulation? Matthews asked slowly. I'm telling you that the late king understood that the modern monarchy requires modern protection methods, Camilla said. Traditional royal security focuses on physical threats. Charles recognized that in the information age, reputational threats could be just as dangerous to the crown. William stood up and walked to the window again, trying to process what he was hearing. His father, the man who had always seemed so uncomfortable with media attention, had actually been orchestrating a sophisticated campaign to control it. The recordings we found, Collins said, conversations where you discussed private family matters, were carefully scripted to provide believable but harmless information, Camilla finished. Would you like me to explain the context of each one? That would be helpful, Matthews said grimly. Camilla reopened her journal. The recording from December 2003, where I discussed Prince William's relationship with Catherine Middleton. At that time, certain tabloids were preparing to run stories suggesting that William was having multiple relationships and that Catherine was just one of several women he was seeing casually. Catherine shifted in her chair, clearly uncomfortable with this topic. The story they were planning would have portrayed William as a playboy who was using his position to take advantage of young women, Camilla continued. So I gave them a different narrative. I confirmed that William was serious about Catherine, that the family approved of her, and that we expected the relationship to lead to engagement eventually. You manipulated press coverage of the heir to the throne's love life? Matthews asked. I protected two young people from having their relationship destroyed by malicious speculation, Camilla corrected. The alternative story would have damaged both William's reputation and Catherine's. My version was both more truthful and less harmful. William turned back to face the room. What other recordings are there? Conversations about Harry's military service, about the Duke of Edinburgh's health issues, about various charitable activities, Camilla said. In every case, I was providing controlled information to prevent more damaging stories from developing. Matthews was looking increasingly overwhelmed. Your Majesty, what you're describing suggests a conspiracy involving the highest levels of government. These are extremely serious allegations. They're not allegations, Inspector. They're facts. And they're all documented in files that are stored in a secure location, with copies held by the Cabinet Office. The government knows about this? The government has always known about this. How do you think we were able to operate for 25 years without being detected? This wasn't a rogue operation, Inspector. This was official policy, conducted with full governmental approval. Collins had stopped typing and was staring at Camilla with something approaching awe. Ma'am, if what you're saying is true, why hide the evidence in your car? Why not keep it in official files? Camilla smiled slightly. Because sometimes official files disappear when they become inconvenient. I kept my own records as insurance, in case anyone ever tried to disavow knowledge of our activities. William was beginning to understand the full scope of what his stepmother had been involved in. You were protecting yourself as much as the monarchy. I was protecting everyone involved, Camilla said. Including future monarchs who might need to know the truth about how the crown has been defended in the modern era. Matthews closed his notebook and looked at his detective sergeant, then at William. Sir, this investigation has become significantly more complex than we initially anticipated. If the Queen Consort's claims are accurate, we're looking at activities that may have been authorized at the highest levels of government. Which means? William asked. Which means we need to involve other agencies. The Cabinet Secretary, MI5, possibly the Attorney General's office. This is no longer a simple case of media manipulation. Camilla stood up again. Inspector, before you make those calls, there's something else you need to know. The activities I've described ended in 2010 when Charles and I married. Since then, the approach to media relations has been completely different. Why did it end? Because Charles felt that as king-in-waiting, he needed to be above reproach in all his dealings. He wanted to enter his reign with clean hands. So we developed new strategies for media management that didn't involve financial transactions or secret meetings. William looked at his stepmother with new respect. You gave up a system that had worked for decades because Dad wanted to change how the monarchy operated. Your father was always evolving in his understanding of what the crown needed, Camilla said. By 2010, he believed that transparency and authenticity would serve the monarchy better than manipulation and control. And you agreed with that assessment? Matthews asked. I agreed with supporting the king in whatever approach he felt was best for the crown, Camilla replied diplomatically. Collins looked up from her tablet again. Ma'am, there's still the matter of the Swiss bank accounts. Even if these activities were authorized, there are tax implications and financial reporting requirements that don't appear to have been met. William could see that despite everything Camilla had revealed, she was still facing potential criminal charges. The authorization from his father and various government officials might provide context, but it wouldn't necessarily provide immunity from prosecution. Inspector, William said, I need to ask you something directly. Given what you've heard today, what do you intend to do? Matthews was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing his options. Sir, I need to verify the Queen Consort's claims. If her activities were officially authorized, there should be records in government files. I'll need to contact the Cabinet Office and arrange for those files to be reviewed. And, in the meantime? In the meantime, I'm not prepared to make any arrests based solely on the evidence we found in the vehicle.
The context provided today changes the nature of the investigation significantly. William felt a wave of relief, but he could see from Camilla's expression that she understood the situation was far from resolved. However, Matthews continued, I will need the Queen Consort to remain available for further questioning as this investigation expands. And I'll need access to all records related to these activities, including the files she mentioned storing in a secure location.
Of course, Camilla said. Inspector, I've been carrying these secrets for 25 years. I'm actually relieved that the truth is finally coming out. Even if that truth leads to criminal charges? Even then. The Crown is more important than any individual, including me.
Matthews and Collins gathered their materials and prepared to leave. As they reached the door, the inspector turned back to William. Sir, you should be prepared for this investigation to become very public very quickly. Once we start requesting government files and interviewing officials, word will leak to the press.
I understand, William said. How long do we have? Days, not weeks.
I'd suggest you and your family prepare for intense media scrutiny. After the police left, the morning room felt strangely quiet. William, Catherine, and Camilla sat in silence for several minutes, each processing the enormity of what had just occurred.
Well, Camilla said finally, that went better than I expected. Catherine looked at her incredulously. Better?
Camilla, they're about to investigate the entire government's involvement in media manipulation.
This could bring down the monarchy.
Or it could demonstrate that the monarchy has been willing to evolve and adapt to protect itself, William said thoughtfully.
The question is how we manage the story when it breaks. Camilla smiled wryly.
My dear boy, after 25 years of managing stories, I think I might have one more left in me. The hours following the police interview passed in a blur of urgent phone calls and hastily arranged meetings. By afternoon, Clarence House had been transformed into something resembling a war room, with private secretaries, legal advisors, and communication specialists moving through the hallways with grim expressions and thick folders.
William stood in Camilla's study, watching through the window as unmarked government vehicles arrived in the courtyard.
The cabinet secretary had arrived first, followed by representatives from the Attorney General's office and two officials he didn't recognize but who carried themselves with the quiet authority of intelligence operatives. They're treating this like a national security crisis, Catherine observed from behind him. She had spent the morning making arrangements for their children, ensuring they would be shielded from whatever media storm was about to break. Because it is one, William replied grimly. If Camilla's right about the scope of government involvement, this doesn't just threaten the monarchy. It threatens to expose 25 years of officially sanctioned media manipulation at the highest levels of British government. The door opened, and James Whitmore entered, his usually calm demeanor showing cracks of strain. Sir, the cabinet secretary is ready to begin the briefing. He's asked that only you and the Queen Consort attend initially.
William nodded and turned to Catherine. Stay close.
Once they start talking, we need to be ready to move quickly on damage control. The main drawing room had been cleared of its usual furniture and set up with a conference table. Sir Michael Hartley, the cabinet secretary, sat at one end with several thick files spread before him. His grey hair was perfectly styled as always, but his face showed the stress of a man who had spent his career managing government secrets and now faced the possibility of many of them becoming public. Camilla entered the room with the same dignity she had shown that morning, despite having spent hours being questioned by various officials. She took her seat across from Sir Michael, while William positioned himself at the head of the table. Your Royal Highness, Your Majesty, Sir Michael began formally, we need to discuss the implications of this morning's revelations and determine how to proceed.
I assume you verified the Queen Consort's claims? William asked.
We have, Sir Michael confirmed, opening one of his files. The activities she described were indeed authorized and coordinated through this office, with the full knowledge and approval of 3 successive prime ministers. William felt a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. Relief that Camilla hadn't been acting as a rogue agent, but apprehension about what this meant for everyone involved. The files contain detailed records of every operation, Sir Michael continued. Media contacts, financial transactions, strategic objectives, and outcome assessments. The Queen Consort's account this morning was remarkably accurate. So she was telling the truth about everything? Yes, sir. However, that creates a significant problem for all of us. Camilla leaned forward slightly. Michael, you knew this day might come. We all did. The question is whether we're going to handle this transparently or try to cover it up. Sir Michael's expression was troubled. Your Majesty, transparency in this case means revealing that the British government has been conducting systematic media manipulation for a quarter century. It means admitting that official policy included bribing journalists, suppressing stories, and deceiving the public about the true nature of royal media relations. It also means admitting that these activities were conducted to protect national interests, William pointed out. If the operations were as successful as Camilla claims, they prevented genuine damage to constitutional stability. That's one way to interpret it, Sir Michael agreed. But, there's another interpretation that our political opponents will certainly embrace, that this represents a fundamental breach of democratic principles and press freedom. The door opened, and another official entered, a woman William didn't recognize, but who carried herself with obvious authority. Sir Michael stood as she approached. Your Royal Highness, may I present Director Sarah Thornton from MI5? She's been briefed on the situation and has some additional information we need to discuss. Director Thornton was a tall, sharp-featured woman in her 50s, with graying brown hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of the room. She nodded respectfully to William before taking her seat. Sir, I've reviewed all files related to Operation Crown Shield, which was the internal designation for the media management program the Queen Consort described, she began. I need to inform you that some of these activities intersected with ongoing security operations in ways that complicate our current situation. What kind of complications? William asked. Several of the journalists who received payments from the Queen Consort were also providing information to foreign intelligence services, Director Thornton explained. Not about royal matters, but about other government activities they had access to through their media work. William felt his stomach drop. You're saying that Camilla's operations may have inadvertently compromised national security? Not compromised, sir, but complicated. In some cases, our agents were monitoring these same journalists as potential security risks while the Queen Consort was paying them to suppress stories. We occasionally found ourselves working at cross-purposes. Camilla looked shocked for the first time that day. Michael, you never told me about any security concerns with my contacts. Because we didn't want to compromise your operations, Sir Michael replied. Your activities were generally more important to national stability than our intelligence concerns. Generally? William's voice was sharp. Director Thornton consulted her notes. There was one case in 2003 where a journalist the Queen Consort was paying for story suppression was also selling information about British military operations in Iraq to Iranian intelligence operatives. The room fell silent as the implications of this revelation sank in. You're telling me that money intended to protect the royal family may have indirectly funded espionage against British forces? William's voice was barely controlled. That's possible, yes, sir, Director Thornton admitted. Though we should note that the Iranian connection wasn't discovered until 2007, long after the Queen Consort's transactions with that particular journalist had ended. William turned to Camilla, whose face had gone pale. Did you have any knowledge of this? Of course not, she said quietly. William, if I had known that any of my contacts were involved with foreign intelligence, I would have ended those relationships immediately. The problem, Sir Michael interjected, is that this information is also contained in the government files. If there's a full investigation, this will all come to light. William stood and walked to the window again, trying to process the expanding scope of this crisis. What had started as evidence of Camilla selling royal secrets had evolved into something far more complex, an officially sanctioned program that may have inadvertently assisted foreign espionage. What are our options? He asked without turning around. Director Thornton and Sir Michael exchanged glances. Practically speaking, sir, we have three choices, the cabinet secretary said. First, we can attempt to classify all related materials under national security provisions and prevent any public disclosure. Second, we can cooperate fully with any investigation, provide complete transparency, and accept whatever political and legal consequences emerge.
And the third option?
We can attempt a managed disclosure, Director Thornton said. Release carefully controlled information that explains the royal protection operations while minimizing exposure of the broader intelligence implications.
William turned back to face the room. Which option do you recommend?
Honestly, sir? Sir Michael's voice was weary.
I'm not sure any of them are viable.
The classification approach might work legally, but it would create enormous political problems if it became known that we were covering up royal involvement in media manipulation. The full transparency approach would likely destabilize the government and potentially compromise ongoing intelligence operations. And the managed disclosure approach requires us to control a story that already has too many variables.
What about the current investigation? Inspector Matthews is expecting government cooperation.
We're going to provide him with sanitized files that confirm the basic facts the Queen Consort presented without revealing the intelligence complications, Director Thornton said. But we can't guarantee that his investigation won't uncover additional information. Camilla had been listening to this exchange with growing frustration. You're all talking about this as if it's a crisis to be managed rather than a success story to be celebrated. For 25 years, we protected the monarchy, prevented constitutional crises, and maintained stability during some of the most difficult periods in modern royal history.
Your Majesty, Director Thornton said respectfully, the problem isn't what you accomplished.
The problem is that the methods you used to accomplish it are now being scrutinized in a very different political climate. Political climates change, Camilla said firmly.
Constitutional monarchy endures. That was always the point.
William returned to his seat at the table. The question we need to answer is whether revealing the truth serves the long-term interests of the crown, even if it creates short-term problems for the government. Sir Michael said carefully, there's another factor we haven't discussed yet.
The current Prime Minister wasn't briefed on these operations when he took office.
He learned about them this morning when I informed him of the police investigation.
And his reaction?
He's concerned about the political implications. His party ran on a platform of government transparency and media reform. Having this come to light during his tenure would be extremely damaging. William could see the political calculations at work. The Prime Minister would be looking for ways to distance himself and his government from operations that had been conducted under previous administrations.
Is he going to throw us under the bus? William asked bluntly.
He's going to do whatever he believes will best serve his political survival, Sir Michael replied diplomatically. The door opened again, and James Whitmore entered with an urgent expression. Sir, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation developing. The BBC is reporting that police have been investigating undisclosed financial activities by a senior royal. They don't have specifics yet, but they're clearly preparing a major story. William felt his pulse accelerate.
How long do we have? Hours, at most.
Once one outlet breaks the story, everyone else will follow quickly.
Director Thornton stood up.
Sir, we need to make a decision about our approach immediately. If we're going to attempt any kind of controlled disclosure, it has to happen before the media narrative gets ahead of us. William looked around the table at these representatives of institutions that had served the British state for centuries, the Cabinet Office, the intelligence services, the monarchy itself. All of them were now facing a crisis that threatened to expose the uncomfortable realities of how power actually operated behind the scenes of British democracy.
Camilla, he said quietly, if we tell the complete truth, publicly and immediately, what do you think happens to the monarchy?
She was quiet for a moment, considering. I think we demonstrate that the crown has been willing to adapt and evolve to meet modern challenges. I think we show that protecting constitutional stability sometimes requires difficult choices. And I think we trust the British people to understand the difference between service and self-interest.
And if they don't understand that difference? Then, we weather the storm and rebuild, the same way the monarchy has always done.
William made his decision.
Sir Michael, Director Thornton, I want you to prepare a complete briefing for the Prime Minister. Everything.
The successful operations, the intelligence complications, the full scope of government involvement.
He needs to understand exactly what he's dealing with. And then, sir? Then, we tell the truth. All of it.
We get ahead of the story, we explain the context and the rationale, and we accept responsibility for the consequences.
Sir Michael looked troubled. Sir, that approach carries enormous risks.
Every approach carries enormous risks, William replied. But only one approach allows us to control our own narrative instead of having it controlled for us. Camilla smiled for the first time since the government officials had arrived.
Your father would be proud of that decision.
I hope so, William said. Because we're about to find out whether the monarchy can survive complete honesty about how it's been protected for the past 25 years. As the officials began gathering their materials and preparing to brief the Prime Minister, William realized that by evening, the careful balance between public duty and private necessity that had defined royal life for a generation would be permanently altered. The question was whether what emerged from the wreckage would be stronger or weaker than what they were about to destroy. The press conference was scheduled for 6 o'clock that evening at Buckingham Palace. William had chosen the throne room for its symbolic weight. Beneath portraits of monarchs who had guided Britain through world wars, economic collapse, and constitutional crises, he would reveal a secret that had protected the crown for a generation. By 5:30, representatives from every major news organization in Britain had assembled in the ornate room, their cameras and recording equipment creating a stark contrast with the gilded walls and ancient tapestries.
The atmosphere was electric with anticipation.
Word had leaked throughout the afternoon that this would be an unprecedented royal announcement, though none of the journalists knew exactly what they were about to hear. William stood in his private study adjacent to the throne room, adjusting his tie and reviewing his notes one final time.
Catherine sat nearby, elegant in a navy blue dress that projected both authority and accessibility.
Camilla had chosen to wear a simple black suit, dignified, serious, appropriate for what she knew would be one of the most difficult hours of her public life. The Prime Minister's statement goes out simultaneously with yours, James Whitmore informed them, checking his watch. He's taking full responsibility for the government's role while emphasizing that all activities were conducted in the national interest.
William nodded.
The coordination had been crucial. If the government and the palace had appeared to be blaming each other, the entire story would have collapsed into partisan chaos within hours.
Any word from Harry? Catherine asked. He's flying back from California tonight, William replied.
He wanted to be here, but I told him to wait until we see how this plays out. No point in all of us being in the fire at once. Through the study window, William could see crowds gathering on the Mall. Word of the unprecedented evening press conference had spread quickly, and people were streaming toward Buckingham Palace with the kind of urgency usually reserved for royal deaths or major national emergencies.
Sir, James said, it's time.
They walked together through the corridors toward the throne room, their footsteps echoing in the unusual evening quiet of the palace. Normally, at this hour, the building would be winding down from the day's official business. Instead, it hummed with the tension of a breaking story that would dominate headlines around the world within hours. William paused at the door to the throne room, gathering himself for what he knew would be the most consequential speech of his life. Everything he said in the next 30 minutes would define how the monarchy was perceived for decades to come.
Ready? He asked Camilla quietly. I've been ready for this conversation for 25 years, she replied. Let's finish it properly.
They entered the throne room together, William in the lead, followed by Camilla and Catherine. The assembled journalists rose respectfully as they took their positions at the podium that had been set up beneath the canopy of state. William looked out at the sea of faces, reporters he had known for years, editors who had covered his family through triumphs and scandals, international correspondents who would carry this story around the globe. Many of them had received information from Camilla's network over the years without knowing it. Some of them may have been paid to suppress stories they never realized they were abandoning. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, William began, his voice carrying clearly through the ornate room.
Thank you for attending this evening's briefing. What I'm about to share with you represents information about royal operations that has never been disclosed publicly. It concerns activities conducted over the past 25 years with the full authorization of the late King Charles III and successive British governments. The room was absolutely silent. Even the sound of camera shutters seemed muted as hundreds of journalists focused intently on every word. In 1998, following a series of media crises that threatened constitutional stability, my father authorized the implementation of a comprehensive media management program. This program was designed to protect the monarchy and, by extension, British constitutional stability, through careful management of information flow to press organizations. William paused, scanning the room. He could see the confusion on many faces as reporters tried to understand what he was describing. The program was coordinated by the Queen Consort, then Mrs. Camilla Parker Bowles, working directly under my father's authority and, with the full knowledge and approval of the Cabinet Office, the Intelligence Services, and 3 successive Prime Ministers. Now he could see understanding dawning on several faces. The more experienced royal correspondents were beginning to grasp the implications of what he was revealing. Over the course of 25 years, this program involved the strategic release of carefully chosen information to redirect media attention away from potentially damaging stories. It included financial transactions with journalists and media organizations. It included the suppression of stories that could have compromised national security or constitutional stability. A murmur ran through the room. Several journalists were typing frantically on their phones, already filing preliminary reports. I want to be absolutely clear about something, William continued, raising his voice slightly to regain attention. These activities were not conducted for personal benefit or to deceive the British people about matters of genuine public interest. They were conducted to protect the constitutional framework that underpins our democratic system. He turned slightly to acknowledge Camilla, who stood beside him with perfect composure despite knowing that her life's work was being exposed to the most intense scrutiny imaginable. The Queen Consort will now explain the specifics of these operations and answer your questions about how and why they were conducted. Camilla stepped forward to the podium, adjusting the microphone slightly. The room was so quiet that the small mechanical sound seemed amplified. 25 years ago, she began, her voice steady and clear, I was approached by representatives of the then Prince of Wales and asked to coordinate a program of media relations that went beyond traditional palace communications. The objective was simple: prevent the destruction of the monarchy by managing the information that reached public attention. She paused, looking out at faces she had worked with for decades, many of whom were now realizing they had been part of a system they never fully understood. I want to address the financial aspects of this program directly, since I know that will be your primary focus. Over 25 years, approximately £3 million was spent on payments to journalists, editors, and media organizations. These were not payments for positive coverage. They were payments for story suppression, for editorial restraint, and for strategic redirection of media attention. The room erupted as journalists began shouting questions simultaneously. Camilla waited calmly for the noise to subside. I'll take questions in a moment, but first I want you to understand the results of this program. During the most turbulent period in modern royal history, from 1998 to 2010, we prevented the publication of stories that would have revealed national security information, compromised government operations, and potentially destabilized British constitutional democracy. Your Majesty! A voice called out from the crowd. Sarah Mitchell from The Times had managed to make herself heard above the others. Are you saying you bribed journalists to suppress legitimate news stories? I'm saying we paid for editorial judgment that prioritized national stability over media sensationalism, Camilla replied calmly. Every story that was suppressed posed a genuine threat to constitutional order or national security. Can you give us specific examples? This from David Clark of the BBC. Yes. In 2003, we prevented publication of details about Prince William's university security arrangements that would have compromised his personal safety. In 2005, we redirected attention away from a story about intelligence gathering operations that would have endangered British agents overseas. In 2008,
we managed coverage of the Duke of Edinburgh's health crisis to prevent market instability related to succession planning.
Another reporter stood up. Your Majesty, how do you justify deceiving the public about the true nature of your relationship with the press? Camilla considered the question carefully.
The relationship between the monarchy and the press has always involved elements that aren't visible to the public. What we did was formalize and systematize those elements in service of a larger purpose. We weren't deceiving the public about matters that concerned them directly. We were protecting them from information that would have been harmful to their interests. William could see that the questions were becoming more aggressive as the initial shock wore off and journalists began to grasp the full implications of what they were being told. "Sir," another voice called out, addressing William directly.
"Did you have knowledge of these activities while they were ongoing?"
"No," William replied firmly. "I learned about the full scope of these operations only this morning, when evidence was discovered during a security investigation. My father chose to shield me from this knowledge to preserve what he called my ability to lead with clean hands."
"And, now that you do know, do you condemn these activities?"
William had anticipated this question, but it was still difficult to answer. "I understand why they were undertaken, and I believe they served their intended purpose of protecting constitutional stability. However, I also believe that the monarchy must evolve with changing expectations of transparency and accountability. These methods will not be continued under my future reign." The questions continued for another 20 minutes, covering every aspect of the program from financial details to international implications. Throughout it all, Camilla answered with remarkable composure, providing specific examples and context while never apologizing for action she clearly believed had been necessary.
Finally, William stepped forward to conclude the briefing.
"Ladies and gentlemen, I know this information raises many questions about the relationship between the monarchy, the government, and the press.
Those questions deserve serious consideration and debate.
What I ask is that you consider these revelations in the context of the results they achieved: 25 years of constitutional stability during a period of unprecedented media scrutiny and technological change." He paused, looking directly into the cameras that would carry this moment around the world. "The monarchy has survived for over 1,000 years by adapting to meet the challenges of each new era.
The methods revealed tonight were one form of that adaptation.
Going forward, we will find new ways to serve the British people that reflect contemporary expectations while preserving the constitutional role that has served our democracy so well."
As William and his family left the throne room, the assembled journalists erupted into frantic activity.
Phones were ringing, laptops were opening, and the first wave of stories was already being transmitted around the world. By 7 o'clock, every major news organization was running the story.
By 8 o'clock, it was trending on social media platforms globally.
By 9 o'clock, politicians from every party were issuing statements ranging from condemnation to grudging respect for the honesty of the disclosure. William, Catherine, and Camilla gathered in the private apartments to watch the coverage unfold. The initial reactions were as varied as they had expected: outrage from press freedom advocates, support from constitutional scholars, confusion from the general public trying to understand what had actually happened. "Well," Camilla said, settling into her chair with a cup of tea, "we've certainly given them something to talk about. The question is whether they'll be talking about constitutional protection or royal deception," Catherine replied, scrolling through news headlines on her tablet. William was watching the BBC's coverage, where constitutional experts were debating whether the program represented a necessary evolution of royal security or an unconscionable manipulation of democratic institutions. "It's going to take weeks for public opinion to settle," he said.
"Maybe months.
The story is too complex for immediate judgment." His phone rang, and he saw Harry's number on the display. "Will," Harry's voice was tight with tension.
"I've been watching the coverage from Los Angeles. Are you all right?"
"We're managing," William replied.
"The truth is out now. Whatever happens next, at least we won't be living with secrets anymore. The American media is going crazy with this story. They're calling it the biggest royal scandal since the abdication." "It's not a scandal, Harry.
It's a revelation about how institutions protect themselves."
"There's a difference." "Is there?"
Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Dad was running a secret operation to manipulate the press for 25 years, and nobody knew about it except Camilla.
William understood his brother's reaction.
Harry had always had a complicated relationship with media manipulation, having been both its beneficiary and its victim at different times in his life.
"Harry, come home," William said quietly. "We need to face this as a family, whatever the consequences. I'll be on the first flight tomorrow morning."
As William ended the call, Catherine looked up from her tablet. The Prime Minister's approval rating has dropped 12 points in the last 2 hours.
"And ours?" William asked. "Too early to tell.
But the initial polling suggests the public is divided almost exactly in half. 50% think you did the right thing by revealing the truth, 50% think the program itself was justified." Camilla had been unusually quiet during this exchange, staring out the window at the crowds still gathered on the mall despite the late hour.
"Regrets?" William asked her.
She turned back to face him, and, for the first time all day, she looked her age.
"About the program?" "No.
It served its purpose."
"About tonight?" "We'll see."
"What do you mean?" "I mean that telling the truth and having people understand the truth aren't the same thing. We've told them what we did and why we did it. Whether they accept that explanation is now out of our hands." Over the following hours, as news of the royal disclosure spread around the globe, reactions poured in from world leaders, constitutional experts, and ordinary citizens.
Some praised William's unprecedented transparency. Others condemned the program itself as a betrayal of democratic principles.
Most struggled to understand how such an extensive operation had remained secret for so long. By midnight, William realized that the old relationship between the monarchy and the British people had ended forever. What would replace it remained to be seen, but it would be built on a foundation of honesty about the uncomfortable realities of power that previous generations had kept hidden. As he prepared for bed, knowing that tomorrow would bring fresh challenges and continued scrutiny, William reflected on the day that had changed everything. He had faced the most difficult decision of his life, whether to protect family secrets or expose them in service of a larger truth. He had chosen transparency, and now he would live with the consequences. The monarchy had survived the disclosure, but survival and strength were different things. In the weeks and months ahead, William would learn whether the British people could accept an institution that admitted to using morally ambiguous methods in service of constitutional stability. Standing at his bedroom window, looking out at the lights of London stretching to the horizon, William understood that he was no longer the same man who had awakened that morning to a phone call about evidence found in Camilla's car. He was now a king-in-waiting who had chosen to reveal the secret foundations upon which modern monarchy rested, trusting his people to judge those foundations fairly. Whether the trust had been wisely placed would determine not just his own future, but the future of the 1,000-year-old institution he was destined to lead.